Good evening and welcome. My name is Garrett Pryor. I will be in charge of technology for the event. I'm represented by the T of Tualatin here on the screen. Buenas noches y bienvenidos. Mi nombre es Garrett Pryor. Estará a cargo de la tecnología para este evento. We are offering a Spanish language option for this event. We are offering a Spanish language option for this event. If you would like to listen in Spanish, please click the interpretation button on the bottom of the screen and choose Spanish. If you would like to mute the presentation in English, click Mute Original Audio. Estamos ofreciendo este evento en español. Si desea escuchar en español, haga clic en el botón de interpretación en la parte inferior de la pantalla y elija español. Si desea silenciar la presentación en inglés, haga clic en silenciar audio original. We want to thank Armando Gutierrez for his help in translating this event in Spanish. Hello, Armando. Queremos agradecer a Armando Gutierrez por su ayuda en la traducción de este evento al español. Hola, Armando. As an attendee, you will not be able to speak or we will not be able to view your video during the event, but please submit any questions or comments into the question or an answer chat, and one of our wonderful city staff will help answer that for you. I will now transition the presentation to our host for the night, Tualatin Senior Planner, Karen Pearl Fox. Karen, you can take it away.
Thank you so much, Garrett. Welcome and good evening to everyone. My name is Karen Pearl Fox, and I'm the Senior Planner for the City of Tualatin. We are so pleased that you could join us tonight for this very special and timely event to discuss the housing and health connection and to consider the barriers and possible solutions to severe housing rent burden. 2020 has been and continues to be a very challenging year for so many amidst a pandemic and most recently the devastating fires in Oregon. Our hearts and thoughts go out to families, households, and individuals that are struggling with matters related to housing insecurity, health, and loss during this time. To kick off this event, I would like now to turn it over to Tualatin's Counselor, Maria Reyes, to provide us with the opening remarks. Thank you so much, Counselor.
Thank you, Karen. I was unmuted. I'm so sorry. My cat keeps jumping and interrupting me, and I don't know what to do. So I apologize if you see him on the screen. Welcome and thank you for joining us tonight. I am Tualatin City Councilor Maria Reyes. We want this event, Our Home, Our Health, to be engaging and inclusive. We want this to be a forum where you can deepen where we can deepen our understanding of the impacts of severe rent burden, identify barriers to reduce rent burden, and seek out solutions. The keynote speaker tonight is Bandana Shretha, Community Engagement Director of Oregon AARP, who will speak about the connection between health and housing, hence the name of the event, Our Home, Our Health. Additionally, we will hear from 2 Tualatin residents and members of the city's Diversity Task Force about their experience renting in the city. Currently, 27.4% of Tualatin residents are severely rent burdened, meaning they spend more than half of their income on housing, and 50% of households in Tualatin are rent burdened but not severe. In addition, historically, underrepresented groups are disproportionately impacted by severe housing rent burden. This event is intended to understand the impacts of severe rent burden. Again, thank you for joining us, and I will turn it over to Karen Pearl Fox, city staff, to lead the presentation. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you so much, Maria, for those very thoughtful and kind words. Very much appreciated. Garrett, do you have any other technical tips that you would like to mention, or shall we go on to the next segment?
I think we can go on to the next segment, Karen.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to give you a brief overview and mention who the speakers and panelists are for this event. Maria did mention some of them, but I'd like to do it comprehensively so you can get a good sense of what the flow of tonight will be and what to look forward to. So our first program is the keynote presentation from Mandana Shretha from AARP Oregon. And we will then be skipping the next session segment that shows up on our program that some of you have seen, which was small group discussions, but we will instead pause briefly after Bandana speaks and allow for questions to Bandana to be put in the Q&A box, which we will then answer later in the event when we get to the open Q&A. So that should be really helpful to have some direct questions and answers from her. We'll then hear from panelists Veronica Aguilar and Africa Nairobi Ramirez Lopez, who will share their personal stories with you related to the topics of this event. And that should be very exciting and powerful. Then that will be followed by a Q&A with the panelists where we will ask specific questions to the panelists that they actually have been given pre-planned, but then we'll have an open Q&A that will follow that are open-ended questions from the attendees from this event. And Betsy Rodriguez-Roof will be reading those questions. And she'll also, by the way, be tracking the time during this event and sending chat messages to folks if the time is going over or if we need to make an adjustment. So watch out, keep your chat open if you're in any case, so you kind of can be clued into her help that way. Next, we'll get an update on the city's recent housing efforts, which will come from Aquila Hurd-Ravitch, our Tualatin Community Development Director. And finally, we're going to wrap up with two short segments. One is from Catherine Gallion from Community Action, who will share an array of available resources in a very short time that may help those experiencing severe rent burden. And then the final wrap up is to provide a segment called Feedback to Action, which will be about what can you do next? How can you stay involved? What's going to happen next? Those types of things. And Garrett will give that final closing segment. So with that, let's move on right into our program. Actually, I just want to thank everybody who is here participating, in particular, who came to this event. This is a hard time to get to an event, and we recognize that. And we're so appreciative of you, as well as the panelists, the speakers, and city staff. Thank you all so much just for being here. That's an accomplishment. The next segment is some polling, and Garrett's going to pull up. We want to find out a little bit about who's actually here and what matters to you. If you wouldn't mind, this would be for all attendees. And Garrett, is this for the panelists too, or just attendees?
Just attendees. We have 24 attendees tonight.
Okay, great. Okay, so for the attendees, please just go right ahead and fill out. They're pretty simple yes, no, or multiple choice type questions. If you take a few moments here to fill that out, we'll kind of get a sense of the attendees and who you all are.
And Karen, I'll monitor and let you know how many people have completed. We're about 40 seconds in.
Okay.
We have no full completions yet, but let's see who can win the grand prize.
So it looks like we have 80% of attendees from Tualatin. Yay. And we have 40% renters, 60% owners. And we have the cost of housing makes it hard to get into or stay in housing that is affordable, with 55% agreeing, 55% strongly agreeing, 40% agreeing, and a few neutrals. Nobody disagreeing outright. For quality, safe, and stable housing, does it play a key role in the personal health of myself and my family? 80% strongly agree, 20% agree, so very high numbers there. What brought you here today? The biggest number here is for affordable housing issues, it's 55%. And then we have close to that 25% information about the speakers and panels. So thank you, panelists and speakers, for drawing an audience. And a smattering of the other categories, in every category about 10 to 15%. And then what is the best city? Tualatin by 75%, with close second in Wakanda. Thank you all very much. All right, now I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Mandana Shretha. Her presentation will consider key housing challenges and related health impacts for those severely rent burdened, and will look towards solutions for Tualatin. Bandana is the Director of Community Engagement for AARP Oregon. She leads AARP's livable community work in Oregon, including growing and supporting the network of age-friendly communities in the state, advocating for policies and programs that enhance affordable and accessible housing options, and expanding transportation and mobility options for all. Before joining AARP, Mandana served as Director of Model Programs and Partnerships for the Points of Light Foundation, where she developed and led programs to engage and serve diverse, underserved populations. She is originally from Nepal. Vandana, thank you so much for being here. I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Karen. It's great to be here. Hi, everybody. I love doing stuff in Tualatin, and I see some folks on the participant list. I want to say hi to folks' names I recognize. As Karen said, my name is Bandana Shrestha. I'm the Director of Community Engagement for AARP Oregon, and it's my pleasure to be here today. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can do this one thing before I go any further. Hold on. Yay, did it happen? I think it did.
I think so. You got it.
I think I'm sharing it. Yes. Okay, wonderful.
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, that's good. That's always a good start. So for those of you who don't know anything about AARP, AARP is the nation's largest nonprofit organization, but we're also based locally. Our state office is right here in the Portland metro area. And we are a membership organization. We're a social change organization. Our work is primarily focused on empowering people to have choices as to how they live as they grow older, as they age. And that includes, that means our work is focused on public policy changes, educating and empowering our members and the general public, and community service and volunteerism. And we work at all levels, at the national, state, and local levels. Part of our work is all about livable and age-friendly communities, and advancing those principles that allow for people to live in their communities throughout their life course, regardless of their age, their ability, their income, their background, their race, or family size. And of course, in that mix, housing is a critical part of it. And I'm going to show you a couple of slides right here. So at AARP, we use the term age-friendly communities a lot, and we use the age-friendly communities framework to help communities become great places for people of all ages. And the framework you see in front of you shows that there are 8 domains that make communities livable, and that includes built environment domains like transportation, outdoor spaces, and housing, as well as the more social, economic, service environments that contribute to livability, that include things like community supports and health, respect and inclusion, social participation, opportunities for employment. And when you talk about livable communities, any one domain does not exist by itself. If you really want to enhance the quality of life of people, to contribute to their health and well-being, you really need to be thinking in a more holistic manner. So today I'm going to be talking mostly about housing and health, but as we discuss, you'll see that things are all connected, and hopefully we will take away from this discussion some of the interconnectedness of how these things work and how we need to approach solutions. So before we go any further, I want you to just take a second and think about, what does home mean for you? And I'm not going to ask you to answer because, first of all, you can only chat with me by chat, but just give it a minute and give it a second and let's talk about it. Well, the Merriam-Webster dictionary says a home is a place where you live. Essentially, it is a place, a shelter. But I bet if you are like me, when you think about home, you think about a lot more than just a physical structure. For me, when I think about home, I think about home here I'm an immigrant here, but I also think about home as in Nepal, where I grew up, where I still have family. And so for me, family belonging is a very strong part of what I think about when I think about home. Home means security, it means relationships, it means a place where you grow and dream, it means a place where you meet your neighbors and create social connectedness. So in that sense, home is really the kernel, the building block of livability, both in terms of our communities, but also the kind of lives we make. So I like to say home is not just a place where you live, but also where you make your life. And here's a set of pictures. I love pictures, as you can tell. Shows young families, older adults living and breathing in their home. So it's I want to set that stage before we talk about sort of the housing part of home, and not to forget that home is not just about providing a physical space, though that is really important too, because we see every day how lack of affordable housing and lack of housing causes so much trauma and has a grave impact for everybody who has to deal with it. But anyhow, here is a slide that just has two words: housing and security. So one of the things that we know at AARP, we do a lot of research, with people 50 plus, but more recently, our last home and community based survey that was done in 2018 asked questions of not just people 50 plus, but actually surveyed people 18 and over. And it had to do with, what are people's aspirations as to where they want to live, how they want to live. And what that survey showed is that people really want to live and remain in their community as long as possible. And I'm not just talking about people 50 plus, but really people who are 18 to 44, 40, I would say 50 to 60% of adults 18 to 49 say they want to remain in their communities. And then as you grow older, the higher percentage of people say they want to age in place. So we really need to think about how housing is that fundamental element that allows people to age in place, to remain in their communities. But what we really have is a housing security, insecurity crisis, an epidemic in our communities. Every day we see people who have to live on streets. But more than that, housing insecurity shows up in great many different ways. And here in the slide, you see that there's a picture of a chicken coop. And I put that there because ARP, actually, our history, our founding started with when our founder found one of her retired educator colleagues living in a chicken coop in back of somebody's house. And that was 70 years ago, but it doesn't seem like that has changed a great deal for a lot of people. And one of the things that Ethel did was to start AARP and this National Retired Teachers Association, because she found that this person, her colleague who was living in a chicken coop, was suffering from all sorts of other things like access to healthcare. And she saw the need to really advocate for that. So as we think about our home and our health today, that's just a small story to say that this has been around for a long time. So how is it going to be any different for us going forward? I think it starts by really understanding the interconnectedness of issues, and focusing on some of the key issues that hopefully help us navigate and find solutions as we try to think about better outcomes for people of all ages in our communities. So I want to focus on three areas. The first one is housing affordability and cost and how that impacts health. And the second one is quality and design of housing and how that impacts health. And lastly, location and neighborhoods and how that impacts health. So housing affordability, obviously housing insecurity has to do with lack of affordable housing in our communities. We are talking about rent burden, and I'm not going to dwell on that a lot because some of the other speakers, even in introduction, talked about what housing cost burden means, that you're paying more than 30%, or if you're really severely rent burden, you're paying more than, or housing cost burden, you're paying more than 50% of your income on housing. And essentially, when you are paying that much on housing, it leaves very little money to do the other things in life that is necessary, like buying food, or paying for medication, or paying for transportation if you need to go somewhere. And one of the things that is noteworthy for Oregon is that the percentage of Oregonians who are housing cost burden has been rising steadily since 2000. And between 2007 and 10, there was a 16% jump. And that's just 3 years. And that hasn't continued to peter out in any sort of way, as you know. This slide is from the National Low Income Housing Coalition and shows you that we have a deficit about almost 100,000 rental homes deficit for those people who are considered extremely low income. And extremely low income are people who make, or households that make only $25,000 for a 4-person household. And of the people who, households that are rent burdened, 22% are lower income. It looks like I have only 2 minutes, so I'm going to run through the rest of this really quickly, which is terrible timing on my part for dealing with my stuff here. So I think somebody else mentioned that people who are people of color, older adults are often the people who are most rent burdened because for older adults, for instance, are living on fixed incomes. And similarly, even though there's been a great resurgence since the 2008 economic recession, people of color have not benefited from that. Some of these I'm going to skip. So in terms of quality of housing and design, there are a couple of things. Like if you are dealing with cost of housing and are rent burden, you're also going to be making some compromises as to the kind of housing that you will end up living in. Maybe you will go for a house that has mold problems, or it doesn't have enough insulation. And if you're somebody who has a disability, you may end up having to live in a house that is not very accessible. And that means that there may be falls. And falls happens to be one of the highest reasons for fatalities for older adults. And a lot of those falls happen at home because you're living in substandard homes or homes that don't meet your needs. And in COVID situation points to the fact that we have it really exemplifies some of the disparities that our communities are currently experiencing. The highest rate of deaths from COVID have been people of color. And researchers have been talking about why is that? And part of that has to do with the crowded living situation that a lot of communities, families of color are ending up living in. And that has to do with lower income, that has to do with long-standing disparities that come from, racial segregation and the type of housing that communities of color were living in. And I also want to mention the fires that just recently took place. This picture that you see in front of you, those two pictures, is from Talent in Phoenix, where about 9 manufactured trailer parks were destroyed in the fire. And a lot of the residents in those parks were Latino community members, our neighbors, older adults, people living on fixed incomes. The issue is here, going back to the issue of housing quality and design, is that, you know, not to say that manufactured housing necessarily are prone to fires, but that these parks had a lot of older homes that were built at a time in the 70s before HUD instituted certain measures to make mobile homes more fire resistant. So, you know, lower income families are making choices that put them at risk, health risk, and losing not only their home, but potentially their lives. So the last point that I want to focus on is related to housing, is the housing location and neighborhood design. And here's somebody who's standing at a bus stop. It is barely just a pole, obviously waiting for a bus. The location of your home really has a lot to do with how well you do in life, whether you have access to transportation. Is there transit? Is it a walkable place? And also, you know, is it a place where you are close to good schools? There is a great tool put out by Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. I encourage you to go and take a look at it. This particularly compares two addresses. One is the Tualatin. I think is that the library or the senior center now? I can't focus. I think that was the library, but I'm not sure. It might have been the senior center. The two senior centers in two communities, and very close communities. One's in Tigard, one's in Tualatin. And you see that there's a 5-year longevity difference, life expectancy difference. So that goes to, you know, like if you're living in these two very neighboring communities, but there are really different outcomes. Why is that? Some of it has to do with housing and whether or not people have, you know, we have housing in places that help people thrive. And those things that help people thrive are what I talked about previously about the age-friendly communities. Are there all those things available? You can't just put a house somewhere and say, oh yeah, it's an affordable house, and then it's not a house that's going to support you and give you a place to really make a life. And here's a picture of a child. A lot of times families are making choices and they may move and go and, you know, to a place where there are more options for better schools, but then they may be losing out on other things like making, you know, choices and not having enough food at home because they're living in a place where they're paying more. So I know that I've run out of time, so I'm gonna just show you this one slide, which I love the animation, saying that, you know, our home is the linchpin for our well-being, both our financial, physical, mental, and as well as our social connectivity. And you know, even though we talk about different generations, at least in AARP, we talk about starting with people 50 plus. The truth is, when we talk about homes, housing, when we talk about affordability, we have more shared interests than not. And it has to do with the kind of community we envision, where we can all thrive, where we have access to transportation, we have varied type of housing, we have open spaces and parks that all together contribute to our well-being and our health. Thank you so much. I'm sorry I took a little bit of time longer, Karen. I'm done with this now.
Thank you so much, Bandana. That was such a rich and important and timely presentation for our times. I think it's all given us a little bit to think about. And I'd like the attendees and actually all who are on here to just take a moment, to just pause for a moment. I'm just going to give you a moment here and think about what you heard. And when people are ready, if you choose, you can enter any questions you might have to Bandana in the Q&A. Okay, so you may continue to put questions as they come to you in the Q&A, but we are going to start our moderated panel now in the essence of time. And two of our panelists we're going to start with who are going to be doing personal story sharing. That is Veronica and Africa. They'll each briefly introduce themselves and then each will share their personal stories and experiences related to severe housing rent burden. And then Bandana will, after we finish the storytelling component, Bandana will join them for a Q&A that will follow. So Veronica, welcome. And please go ahead and introduce yourself. Come on the screen with a video. And then start us off with sharing your story.
Yes. Hello, everyone, and good evening. My name is Veronica Aguilar. I identify myself as a Black Latina, married, mother of 3. I am a 26-year resident of the Tualatin Tigard area. I am an educator employed by this great district of Tigard Tualatin. As a lot of people know, I am a very active community member, part of the Tualatin Diversity Task Force. And being that position that I have in the city, I want to take advantage of it and actually feel that it's an obligation here tonight to advocate for my people of color, or our people of color, here in our city of Tualatin, utilizing my past experiences and an equity lens, and with the permission of all of you, give you the various personal experiences that I've had as a member of this community and from the voices of the community. And I thank you once again for allowing me to have this space here tonight to share everything that I have with all of you.
Thank you very much, Veronica. Okay, Africa, please introduce yourself and share your story.
Hi, my name is Africa Nairobi Ramirez Lopez. I love the city of Tualatin and have been a resident here for over 25 years. I have worked in this school district in various different roles for over 18 years, and I also have worked as a medical interpreter for 14 years, as well as other jobs serving and supporting the community. In the last few years, it has become necessary for me to work at 3 different jobs in order for my family to continue living within the Tualatin city limits. I felt this was important to keep my family connected to the community and the excellent school district we have found here. In order for me and my family to live in the city of Tualatin, it has required me to have multiple jobs. I needed to supplement my primary job with other employment, since the cost of living far exceeded my income. Not only was it difficult to overcome the cultural barriers of being a Latina woman, I also had added responsibility to maintain a home as a single parent. These were not easy things to do, but I kept working, looking for opportunities and mentors until I could proudly say that I was able to provide for my 3 children, each one now a college student who went through the Tigard Tualatin School District and graduated from Tualatin High School. Unfortunately, despite all that I have accomplished in this city, I too face what many other families face: increasing rent and the general high cost of living here in Tualatin, and forcing me out of this place, which has been my home and my community for so many years. I don't want to leave behind my family and friends, whom I lean on for support, but I can see no other choice. I know I'm not the only one going through this, because I hear the same concerns from others in my community. Families are forced to move out of Tualatin due to the high rent increases and a lack of well-paying jobs in the area, forcing many to take on multiple jobs just to be able to afford the cost of living here. Children are paying the consequences of not being able to live in the community they grew up in by moving to another school, and most of the time by moving to another district or even another state. Families lose out when they cannot even be home with their children because of their many jobs. And thank you for having me here, giving me the opportunity to express and say my story.
Thank you so much, Africa. Both of your stories, Veronica and Africa, are extremely profound and moving. And both have required an enormous amount of courage, I know, for each of you to share them openly in the public like this. We are deeply appreciative that you took the chance on us to do that. Now let's transition to a three-way panel. Bandana will join Veronica and Africa. And we have some key questions that the panelists have been given ahead of time. And we'll start with that. It's really a two-part Q&A that we're doing. The first part is these kind of pre-planned questions, and the second part is open-ended. So Veronica, I'll start back with you. That's okay. The first question is, what barriers or impediments are there that you see to reducing severe housing rent burden?
Well, I want to give you some background knowledge of where I get credibility in saying everything that I'm about to say. Being vulnerable, I'm going to admit that I am an employee of the district, and I am very strongly advocating always for the good of others. I actually took the time in this past summer to be a firsthand experience where the summer program, feeding program, had stopped when the school year stopped mid-June. I advocated not as an employee, but as a community member, and I noticed that the need continued, especially in the middle of this pandemic. I advocated, I did influence and take some of the influences I had in the district and advocated with others to try to strive to get food, which is just a basic need, to our community, and I mean in the city of Tualatin. I was out on my own vehicle. I advocated and I got food from various places within the city, and then from local businesses that donated pastries, hot meals to me to go out into the city of Tualatin and some of these apartment complexes that a lot of us live in, and just give out food. Because I advocated later on, the school district was very cooperative and very understanding and providing lunches, packed lunches, and continuing the summer program into the summer in the middle of the pandemic, and which is something they had done in the past, but had not done in a more local on premises in these apartment complexes. And I volunteered my time out of my own time. Instead of taking the summer off as an educator and not working, I worked using my own vehicle and recruited others in the community in these apartment complexes to help me give out sack lunches. The reason why I explain all this to you is because me being into these apartment complexes and being on these premises allowed me to have a very raw, heartfelt communication face-to-face with a lot of our residents. And I got very emotional to see the sadly poor, high crime, low income, high rent apartment complexes that a lot of my own families that I have as an educator have known for years, and seeing their living arrangements affecting them not only with their health, not having the option to move out of these apartment complexes, having to deal with very poor windows that brought in mold in some of these buildings, having to see children living with the fear of not having a meal on their table because their parents had to decide whether they should be paying the rent or should they be providing a meal for their children on the table. And to me, and any human being, that is a very tough decision as a parent. and to make. If you provide a roof over your head for your child, your family, or do you provide food? And being able to be out there, I was able to also see how a lot of these families, because of the circumstances and the barriers of being undocumented, the lack of English to advocate for themselves, or even, and I'm not speaking about just our Latinx communities, I'm speaking about all communities of color. I'm talking about Pacific Islanders, African American communities also, and even our white families, that they're put in this decision making in the middle of a pandemic, having to base on only one income in the household sometimes, parents losing their jobs, not having affordable housing to go to, and still fight for being able to stay in the city so they can have a higher and more better education than they had as children, and providing that for their children. It's just it's something that that I invite you all to do sometime, and even city officials, politicians, and even those of you that are employed in Tualatin, to go out into the community firsthand and listen to the stories, pull up a chair, even a far away 6 feet during this COVID pandemic, and listen, and you'll hear what I heard. And it's impossible not to take advantage of spaces like this and actually advocate for others when you know that they can't. And I just want to end by saying that coming, and I'm going to be vulnerable in saying that I'm coming from a single household. I was for some time a single parent, and I went through the same thing. I had to decide at times. I didn't have the appropriate income to pay my rent. I had to swallow my pride and look for what's best for my child, and I had to advocate. And so I hope that you listen to what everyone is saying here tonight, and keep in mind the stories of those in our community.
Thank you very, very much, Veronica. So I'm going to ask the same question to the two other panelists. Africa, what barriers or impediments are there that you see to reducing severe housing rent burden?
This is a really hard question, but what I think is some barriers or impediments are the lack of high-paying jobs in the area, funding to help with rental assistance, especially now with COVID, equity, laws to support affordable housing, availability of affordable homes. Without programs to help with funding affordable housing programs, our community cannot help individuals who need this kind of benefits. So those are my thoughts. I know that the city of Tualatin will touch more on this, and I don't think there's like a right answer, but that's just what I have to put in.
Thank you, Africa. Very much appreciated. Bandana, the same question to you. What barriers or impediments are there that you see to reducing severe housing rent burden?
I think what both Veronica and Africa have pointed to, both kind of things that we can address through policy, but also the personal experiences that sometimes individuals and families are facing, like not being able to advocate for themselves, those kind of things, and having to struggle between making these very difficult decisions, but also things like just not having enough the right type of affordable housing in the community, not having assistance, rental assistance. I think for Tualatin, in just thinking about the more suburban context, I think the high cost of transportation, it may be an issue. How are people getting around? How it's not just housing. You have to figure in that the transportation costs, and if you have to travel distances, if it's not very walkable, that might be some of the other things. And just in terms of a challenge for thinking about rent burden, because the rent or your housing cost is not just that by itself. It's sort of other things kind of add up to that too. And I think like what sort of um, housing are we allowing to be built in any community? This is a conversation that I've seen take place a lot in Portland. What sort of housing is being built? Is it really meeting the needs of people who live there? And I don't know if I can point to the barriers necessarily, but that's something potentially to look at in terms of finding solutions for being able to offer more opportunities for reducing rent burden.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we have a second question. And Veronica, are you still there? Okay, second question. We'll do the same round. What solutions do you suggest, Veronica, to reduce severe housing rent burden in Tualatin? So we went from barriers, now we're on solutions.
The solutions, which I have plenty to give. From what solutions that I've heard directly from the community is, like I mentioned, a lot of our people of color are unfortunately undocumented in this country. So you can have organizations which I even myself, I'm not shy to say I'm vulnerable in saying that as a single parent, I had to refer to assist me in paying my rent. Unfortunately, because of a lot of this immigration status of a lot of our residents here in the city of Tualatin, they don't qualify. Or what could happen as some residents, either they don't qualify for because they're undocumented. And so making it programs with flexibility of being eligible, being more flexible because of their undocumentation, and also that middle class that they don't make too much, they make too much or they make too little, and that are in the same, there's a lot of seasonal jobs out there that people are having to take the jobs, and you don't qualify, or you don't qualify for food stamps, but then you don't qualify for assistance either. So, and you still cannot make ends meet. So I believe that it's necessary that we have to make more ability in those programs. Also, most importantly, have the cost of living taken in mind, and when it comes to the rent costs. And that I'm going to say that I kind of mentioned is that not only go out into the community, invite those people of color and the right people at the table, stakeholders, like I'm privileged to do tonight, and to have a lending ear of firsthand ideas from them themselves. And also programs that will help assist families with the maintenance and how to advocate for themselves without having fear of reporting and having reprimand for reporting inadequate living arrangements or living because of maintenance.
Thank you. Okay, Africa. What solutions do you suggest to reduce severe housing rent burden in Tualatin?
Okay, well, I'm not exactly sure about solutions, but I know it impacts my family and me, as well as many other families. I do believe that establishing rental assistance programs, not just on the national level, but locally in Tualatin, can help to ease the financial burden. Support new development of affordable housing units or within existing units. Local supportive services can provide assistance to families in identifying ways to stabilize their social, emotional, and economical situation, and to how to thrive in these challenging times. Support groups can also be established, which can share resources that can help with financial assistance and other problems associated with how to live in the community with ever increasing costs. And perhaps there could be some form of legislation which could encourage rent control to keep costs down and maintain diversity in the community. When we eliminate those who are priced out of a neighborhood, we eliminate their diversity, which makes us more vibrant community. And those are my thoughts.
For not having so many, you had some great ones in there. Really good. Thank you. Bandana, What
Well,
solution do you suggest?
she has listed all of them. I would say almost all of them. They were great. I think we should think about both policy and programmatic solutions. One thing I didn't hear mentioned is shared housing, and that's something that I think about, being that I'm with AARP, and a lot of times older adults, traditionally have been homeowners, but as they grow older, they're very house rich, but they might be cash poor and can't really afford it. So shared housing is a great option. So, is there a way for the city to promote shared housing or to support shared housing? That's one. And I just saw an article today in the Next City newsletter talking about how in one of the cities that the loosening of regulations in Austin to allow for more affordable housing. So what is the city doing? I think the city staff will know this much better in terms of really promoting affordable housing, and not just subsidized housing, but also, like Veronica mentioned, there are people who don't qualify. Even if they qualify, they don't qualify because they make $1 more for market, for subsidized housing. So how can you make sure that the market-based housing that is, in Tualatin can be more accessible and not affordable with the big A, but affordable for people who maybe cannot get subsidized housing? How are you doing that? So I know that ARP, we have been very involved with some of those policies at the state level, like House Bill 2001, which is all about promoting varied types of housing, different sizes of housing. I would love to see Tualatin really become an age-friendly community, take, and say, yes, we commit to livability, and also say we will incentivize or mandate more accessible housing, because that's another thing, is that we need varied types of housing at every income level. And especially for lower income families, if you have a disability, or even if it's a temporary disability, sometimes, it becomes such a burden. So those are some of my thoughts. And I think there are some great examples of rental housing assistance. Portland has one that Northwest Pilot Project did, which I think might be interesting to look at as well. So I'll keep my mouth quiet.
Great, thank you. So thank you, first of all of you had an enormous amount of great ideas and wisdom in what you offered. And we are a little bit ahead of schedule. So what I wanted to know is, now that you've heard each other throw out ideas, what bubbled to the top for you of the spectrum of not only what you individually said, but what you heard from each other as a group? Was there a theme? Was there some new idea that just you hadn't heard before that sounds really good? Collectively, what do you think? Where should we go? Where should Tualatin? What should our next move be?
Well, one thing, if I may, take a start on this. Mandana, you said you're with AARP, and I'd like to offer, and I'm going to put the city also in Tualatin and into this set that I forgot to mention, the eviction memorandum that has been extended by the governor, which you don't believe how joyful and it made a lot of parents and a lot of families to say, I still have more time. I'd like to not put you on the spot, of course, and all means, but I'd like to see, or I'd like to offer maybe an idea of assisting those families. There's a lot of and I say us, I can do myself, or thankfully not, but others that I know around me that are just nervous like this. They're edgewise, oh my gosh, now it's not September, now it's December, where the governor has extended this. But they will, time is still not a solution to the issue. And there still will be balances to be paid for rent. And I know I've seen the templates of the letters and that have been offered in more than one language for families to fill out, to keep that communication with managers and property owners. I'm just wondering, is there a development maybe in plan or some way of other programs that we can help those families, like a second option? Okay, I got the time, now who's going to help me minimize that balance, not add on more to the balance in coming December?
It's a great I think that's a great question. I know I was also very glad to see that ARP supported the eviction moratorium, and we were supportive of the tenant protection bill, 608. I think that's another thing, by the way, I would just mention is that I don't know if Tualatin has it, but some local um, jurisdictions have, taken up local tenant protection bills, relocation fees, those kind of things. Sometimes those are tough to get support on, but those are options. There are a lot of different types of options. Some are short term, like thinking about rental assistance, or really working to find options for families so that they are not, come December, a big ballooning, right, thing that they have to pay back. But also, I think, more longer term solutions too. I think it's going to be a fine balance. And I was really moved by both of what you shared, Veronica and Africa. I really appreciate that being candid. And, I work for AARP. The truth is that, AARP, I mean, being older, 50 plus members are not a monolith. They're very diverse. And our policies are geared towards really helping in the broadest way so that people who are doing well can stay doing well, and people who are needing help get the help that they need, right? And in housing, there, like I said, I really love that slide I showed. I always show it about the shared interests we have, and I think part of that is about how do we figure out the most immediate need that we need to address, like what's happening in terms of the crisis now of helping families, but also longer term solutions, which I think Africa laid out really well. I have to say those were really good. So I'm going to shut up. Otherwise, I will keep going on talking. That's a terrible habit. How about you, Africa?
We have a few more minutes before we go on to the open Q&A. Any other thoughts? Anything you forgot to say?
Well, I jumped through a lot. I was going to talk about some of the how economic instability. I mean, housing instability contributes to not just like if kids who are growing up in crowded housing or experiencing housing instability have long-term impacts. So, if you want to think about the future, we really do have to tackle it now and, think of a kind of an integrated way of approaching that. So I'm like, what about you, Africa? I want to hear what you have to say rather than going on.
You can keep going. You're giving great information.
I'm looking to see if I missed anything. Oh, I saw a couple of questions on the from the Q&A, so I'll wait for that.
Okay, well, it sounds like we maybe should move on to the Q&A, and more will bubble up. I'm sure people will tag on to some of the very, very wise things that you've said and the insights that you've all given, which I am deeply appreciative for. I know the team that worked so hard to put this event together is so happy that you both agreed to tell your stories and to participate. And Bandana, you're just an added bonus. So we're very grateful to all of you. So with that, we're going to move into the open Q&A, and that includes all attendees. And Garrett, if you're still there, does that include panelists also, or is it just attendees that get to, I know panelists are responding, but can panelists or city staff also ask questions, or should it just be attendees asking the questions?
Yeah, it should just be attendees asking questions.
Okay, attendees, you're on now to ask questions in the Q&A box. Once those start going, I think that Betsy and Aquila are sort of sorting them, and we'll pull some to the top, and Betsy will read those questions and direct to a panelist. So we have a few minutes here just to get the questions going.
Can you jump on?
Yeah, go for it.
Hello, I'm your friendly Q&A, and I'm going to help field some questions that we already have. So thank you so much for people that have submitted your questions. It looks like we have one from David Carr, who has a question. I think this should be for Bandana. Factors that have lowered life expectancy in Tualatin.
Thank you so much for that question. And I have to say, and the second question looks like it's the same kind of question about why do people have lower life expectancy. And I just picked those two addresses just to demonstrate that, even within a short space, there are people may have shorter life expectancy. It's not an exact science. I love the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. They're doing amazing work and highlighting stuff, but I don't have a specific answer as to why Tualatin, versus the address in Tigard. But generally, what the foundation, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, says is that I'm going to read it. It says, affordable, high-quality healthcare is essential to our health, but where we live can have a greater impact. Improving health and longevity in communities starts with ensuring access to healthy food, good schools, affordable housing, and jobs that provide us the resources necessary to care for ourselves and our families. In essence, the types of conditions that help us keep from getting sick in the first place. So obviously, healthcare or health is not about acute care only. It's about all the things that surround us. That's why I love the age-friendly and livable communities model. So I think we need to kind of think about what are the differences if we're going to compare different parts of our metro area. That's something that I would let Tualatin consider.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bandana. And it looks like we have a question from Jacqueline Castillo, Jackie Castillo. Jackie, can you speak? I don't think so. Okay, so it says, how is this research percentages handled? Meaning how or what is the solution to this issue? And I think that came in after Bandana. So Bandana, would you have an answer to this one?
I think I generally, I'm going to assume, because I'm not exactly sure, but I think the question is, these percentages are high for maybe rent burden, and what can we do to solve it? And we addressed some of it already. I think the issue of, two issues, right? One is we need more housing that's affordable. How do we get there? And the other one is, can we help people who need more income or whatever, so that they have they can afford to continue to live in Tualatin. And in terms of housing solutions, I think we talked about some of them just now, from looking at incentivizing certain types of housing, building more affordable housing, doing rental assistance, tenant protections, all those kind of things are things that'll help. And in terms of helping people find more income, it's not just only income, it's also the surrounding other costs. So I think we also need to think about the nexus of transportation and housing. And I just saw another article that was really interesting to me, because it said instead of looking at housing cost burden as just housing, they flipped it and looked at burden for housing after people have, let's say somebody gets $100 and they're spending $30 for housing, and we say, oh, their cost burden. Instead, they looked at what is the other requirements for that family. Let's say that family needs to spend $70 on or $80 on food and transportation and stuff. And the argument was that we should be looking at the $20 and thinking about housing from that end. Just thinking outside the box in terms of how we calculate, how we measure cost burden. Because in fact, I think families are even more cost burden, because people are doing away with and making choices because they want to stay in Tualatin or in the place that they've wanted to stay. So they're, making some trade-offs. So I hope that at least touches on some of the answers for, the question, but.
Thank you for that. All right, so we have a couple more, and we have a couple more minutes as well. So we have two messages coming in. Thank you to Africa and Veronica for being important leaders in our community. That's from Alice Galloway. And what role does Tualatin business have in hiring and training Tualatin residents to have livable wage jobs? Does Karen or Garrett want to take that one? Or we could always, and we will also be taking all these questions and getting back to everybody with more thorough answers as well.
May I take, oh, go ahead.
This is Aquila Hurd-Ravitch. Hi, I'm the Community Development Director here in Tualatin. So Alice and it looks like Marissa also answered very similar or asked very similar questions. And I think that those are very good questions, poignant and tough to answer. What role do the businesses have in hiring and training Tualatin residents? I'm not sure how to answer that. I think perhaps there's a role that can be filled of connecting residents with jobs in Tualatin. And Marissa makes a good point of how many people in Tualatin commute out of Tualatin, and the number of people who are commuting in to Tualatin for some of the higher paying jobs. So there is certainly a disparity between where people work and where they're able to find housing, and if those are in the same location. So I'd like to put some more thought into that. Our economic development manager is not with us tonight. He's not on the call, so I think it would be a good answer or a good question to pose to him, and we can put our heads together and try to answer that. Alice and Marissa both helped us last year when we did an economic opportunities analysis as well as a housing needs analysis, both very technical documents that started to kind of look at this question. And so the city has some policy work to do to see if there's ways to make some connections. Thank you.
I think that's a good, if I may add that, I think that as a resident like Alice, and that question that maybe when the city makes decisions on what businesses we have and should we allow in the city, to take in those factors, you know, are they fitting just to a certain community members, and is it fitting to all? So it's just something, a question I have.
I just, I'm going to jump in and say, I think I have heard of some cities for city jobs or, you know, municipal jobs, they can put some requirements. So, you know, that's interesting to think about. But a lot of times incentives are great. Always incentives, carrots are always appreciated, especially dealing in the marketplace. So I wonder if there are things that, and this is, you know, I don't have any experience in it, but something to think about is like, are there some special something that, you know, just like with builders, you know, you can give incentives for certain, for builders, for building affordable housing, building housing in a certain way. You know, maybe there's a way to do the same for businesses to really create that climate of helping families. So.
Thank you, everybody, for your questions. We have one, looks like we have one more question here, which is Betelin Lopez is asking, I'm curious, does the city of Tualatin plan to help solve the problems of rent burdens for families? Or are these kinds of meetings with the city just because they are mandated? So I don't know if the city staffer wants to take that one.
I'll attempt that, sure. So that's a great question. So to be very transparent and just honest with our attendees, the state has mandated that we have this meeting. They've mandated it because of the number of renters we have who are rent burdened. We took it as an opportunity. We didn't see it so much as a requirement and a checkbox, but more as an opportunity to connect with our community and delve into this topic. Do we plan to help solve the problems? That is it's a complicated question and answer. We are doing some work right now that I'll get into a little bit more later that we are hopeful will help with the variety of housing that's available. And the variety in terms of, are there townhomes, condos, smaller single family homes that would hopefully translate into more affordable homes. Or a word I heard the other night, which I think is probably more appropriate, attainable. Are these attainable? We are working on it. What I'd like to impress upon the attendees is that we are working on policy. Policy then can translate into development and can translate into programs. And it's not a quick process, but we are committed, and our city council and our mayor are committed to this topic as well.
Thank you for that answer, Aquila. Looks like we have another question from Ricardo Palazuelos. Hola, Ricardo. And his question is, how are TTSD career and technical education funds aligned with the local businesses' needs? How do residents perceive such support in order to avoid brain drain, exodus of youth, post high school graduation? It's a good question. Does the city staffer want to take that one?
It is a good question. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure how, what kind of programs are in the TTSD. I'm sorry, I was just looking for your question to make sure that I was answering it. I don't see it come up anymore. I'm actually curious if Veronica or Africa may know, based on their connections with Tiger Tualatin School District, if you have any insights to this question.
Actually, a good question. I work with elementary students at the moment. I don't work with high school, unfortunately. I only do part of my time. I actually volunteer as president of a nonprofit that has to do with affinity groups in the state with high school students. So I advise him to actually bring that up to a TTSD staff and board members at the next board meeting, and maybe address that as an idea, not only as a question, but also an idea to look into for courses and actually for future generations to learn and to acquire in their curriculum.
Thank you, Veronica. You reminded me that the city does have a program where we partner with the high schools, and there are job shadow programs that happen in our public works department. So kids in high school can learn about, water systems, infrastructure, so pipes for water, sewer, streets. And so I think that program, our job shadows perhaps were put on hold during COVID. So hopefully those will pick up again.
There is, I think the ones you're mentioning is the CE2 program. Correct me if I'm wrong, Africa, I don't know. It's the C2 program that does have job shadows in there. They usually allow students to go out in various businesses. I could be thinking of that one. I could be wrong. So that allow students to have firsthand experience and also be out in their community.
There are different programs, but I'd rather not speak to them because I don't know all of them.
Thank you, everybody, for partnering to answer that question. And the city of Tualatin does have a good relationship with the TTSD. So we will also field that question over to them, or give them the feedback of anything that we are receiving today. So thank you. It looks like we have time for another question as well. Says Marissa is saying, will we ever see affordable rents in the long run, or is ownership the long-term solution? I think that would be a city staffer one as well.
Will we ever see affordable rents? I guess I don't know. And is ownership the long-term solution? We have gone through some policy work to identify different barriers and solutions to rent and home ownership. I think what is important to keep in mind with rent is that there are different paths to being in a home, and so not everybody chooses to be a homeowner, and keeping rent available, keeping rental options available, I think is important in the context of offering a variety of housing. So with that kind of picture set, I think there is some there is some work that would then have to be done through the city or our partners to look at how can we maintain or create affordable rents. Thank you for the question.
May I make a comment? This is Maria Reyes, and I don't know if I can or not, but I just I want to encourage our community and to think big and to think of owning something. I think it's very important that we don't always depend on these rents that, like you said, always come. They always, they go up every year. But I do encourage that we seek to own something, and it's ours, and no one can take that away from us, So I think that's really important that we can start thinking that way, and then we can pass it on to our family members. So I get that we need to get there when, we need assistance now, and it's a burden for all of us. And trust me, I lived 35 years in the city of Los Angeles renting, so I know what that means. And but I always wanted to have something that belonged to me, and I think that's really important for us as a community. As you know, we're learning still. And so I just want us to think that way. Hopefully, as we work with the city and developments come up, there will be that attainable home. And I think that I can't tell you there's rent's gonna go down one day or it's gonna go up, because eventually the person who owns that property has, we can put rent control and all that, but they still own that property. So I always encourage my community to think, and if there's a way that policy-wise or organizations can help to teach home ownership, that's really important, I think, for us and to create asset as well. So there's just
Sorry, Councilor Maria, if I may add to what you're saying, or just make a comment about what you're saying. So that is like my longtime goal that I've had, but paying over $2,000 in rent, and it's just, it's not, there's no way that I can save money to make that down payment to even make that. I mean, that is my long-term goal, and that is my big goal, owning something, and then that way, leaving it to my own children. But it's with the cost of rent, it's just impossible to make that happen. I mean, I just don't see how I will make that, and especially because I'm at that point where I don't make enough to receive all those assistance or help or anything, but I do not make enough for living, and especially when paying or trying to finish your career and also having children in college, it is impossible to either fulfill that dream, at least at this moment with all the rent burden.
And I think that's where when you mentioned rent control and all that, I think that's going to help. That's helpful because it will help at least to not jump that, have that big jump on rent every year, and then have no control of homeowners or people who own property that rent out. We still gotta, of course, take that's one of the steps that we have to do and take care of. But I think that's Africa, you and I have talked about this, and I really, in fact, when I talk about attaining home, I think of you all the time. When we think of developments that are being built and we work with people that are, when we think of that, developments that are going to be built in Tualatin, I think of you, I think of your family, because I have heard your story, and I think that that's one of the things that we're, as a city, as my position, me personally, Maria, want to see in Tualatin, homes that are attainable for a community. And of course, it's a step it's a little by little, and it's a process. And if we can maybe work on other things that you solutions that you actually talked about, we will hopefully get there someday.
Thank you.
That is my hope. And I'm here to talk about my personal story, but I'm also here representing our community.
And if I may give an example to Representative Maria, that that I come from a two income household, and my husband supposedly is a seasonal job and makes too much, and we ourselves even don't make enough to save with car payments. One in college, one in high school, and one in the elementary, and trying to save because COVID is happening, things happen, and the cost of living is, and I've had to move out of both cities and vice versa to see Tigard or Tualatin to see who and where is more affordable. And the comparison to the two cities is something to keep in mind. Because some people, because it is a district of Tigard Tualatin, just so you know that, it's good to compare both cities and see what one city is doing that can assist the other.
Actually, I'm so glad you said that. That was one of the solutions I was going to talk about, is that, housing, I'm on the Metro Housing Bond Oversight Committee. And really one of the things I've learned is that, yes, there was the bond passed and there are housing being built in different places. But really the experience of residents who live is, of course, people want to, like if you've put your roots in Tualatin, you want to stay there. But for a lot of people, I mean, it's a large metro area. So there are we really do need to look at regional solutions, but especially for right there in Tigard, Tualatin, Durham, King City, it just seems like there is a nexus of an opportunity to look at solutions maybe collectively and take a more regional approach. So I appreciate that, Veronica saying. And the other thing I just want to chime in is that I think that's what is interesting about some of the conversation we're having today, is that we're talking about rent burden and how do we reduce that, and that's going to continue to be important. And I'm going to say, please put a focus, laser eye on that. We know from the research that the Joint Center for Housing Studies that Harvard has done that we can, just for older adults, you can expect that the people renting will have doubled in the next 20 years or something. I don't have the exact numbers, but soon it'll be doubling. There are going to be more renters, period. So how are we going to meet that need? Already there, I showed you that slide that said 100,000 rental homes being, not having enough for those extremely low income families. And then on the other hand, I think the emphasis of really trying to allow and figure out how home ownership opportunities can be had for lower income communities of color is going to be really important, because as we know, homes are sort of that, it is the biggest asset. I know working with older adults, it is, you have a lot of benefits to having a home, and it would be awesome. And I think I have seen some really great programs and organizations in our metro area who are doing really amazing works, like groups like Habitat or Proud Ground, and that'd be awesome. So, sorry.
So, I'm sorry to break in, but we have another speaker, and we have some very important things to say at the end in terms of how we're going to continue the continuation of how to be involved in this process. So thank you all so much. There's so much richness. You started on a conversation that is huge, and hopefully we'll find a way to continue that conversation. Aquila, I have a question for you, because you're on next. Are you there, Aquila? Do you want to go ahead with your segment, or should we turn it to Catherine and maybe have you and Garrett wrap up together? I'm just not sure how to do it because we've only got 5 minutes.
Yeah, I think thank you, Karen. I think for the sake of time, it would be great to turn it over to Catherine.
Okay, great. Catherine, are you there? Thank you for waiting through all this time. And Catherine, just 1 second here. Catherine is a very important person in our community in Washington County. She works for Community Action. Community Action has an enormous number of programs. She's going to talk to you about those. And Catherine, I apologize for not giving your whole introduction, but I want you to speak about the content. So go for it.
Fantastic. Let me share my screen really quickly. I'll go ahead and start from here. So, hi, thank you all for having me tonight, and it's been wonderful to hear the other presenters. So I'm Catherine with Community Action, and essentially the ultimate risk of housing cost burden is housing instability and homelessness. At Community Action, we operate and coordinate a range of programs and services, which are up on the screen now, that are intended to make sure that homelessness is rare, short in duration, and non-recurring. And the safety net services that we offer, like rent and utility assistance, serve as an emergency intervention to bridge the gap between what people earn and what it takes to actually support a family in our communities. More than 1,000 Tualatin residents accessed our services last year before COVID. However, I think we've heard very clearly tonight, most folks would rather not have to access safety net services. Laws like the Fair Housing Act and policies like some of the ones we've been talking about tonight serve as ways to eliminate housing discrimination and keep communities open and accessible to all members of our community, and increase the supply and accessibility of affordable housing so that we can build more stable communities. As Bandana outlined tonight, and Africa and Veronica described, the contributing factors to housing cost burden are complex and multifaceted, and so are the solutions. The more we understand about the causes and impacts of housing burden on the people in our community, the better our solutions can be. So thank you for having us all here tonight and being a part of this conversation. And I'll just go back to the services that we offer. And I believe all of this information is in your packet as well.
It is, yes. Thank you so much, Catherine. Garrett, I think you're up next. It's Garrett. I do want to say Aquila's information is in the packet, and she has a diagram about barriers and solutions that we worked on last year, and other materials, and we'll do in our post email on this event. We'll try to fill in the gaps of the things that we couldn't cover. Garrett, do you want to give the feedback to action?
Yep. I'm just pulling that up right now. I had to do a few
And we're a
things.
little over, so I hope people can hang in there for just a few more minutes and we will conclude.
Okay. I don't know why it's not presenting there. Okay. So Aquila, do you want to cover this or do you want me to just speak through it? Okay.
Sure. I'll speak to it really quickly.
Yeah.
Thank you all for hanging in there. And thanks for joining us. So Tualatin 2040 was a project last year that encompassed 3 different efforts with a housing needs analysis, economic opportunities analysis, and then that resulted in a policy priorities document. So those are all very technical actions that took place. We did have a lot of great community involvement in that to help give some input on that direction. So this year, the planning department is working on implementing that work, and they are creating a new housing chapter for our comprehensive plan, which basically means the long-term policy document for land use. And then with that, they'll update our development code, which regulates zones and development, and will hopefully allow for more types of housing to be built with potentially fewer barriers. And then a brand new piece that we're embarking on that I think we're probably the first ones in the state to do is actually a housing production strategy. So that's where we will go through and identify how can we encourage / partner to have more housing built in the city. So that will hopefully address some of the feedback and questions that we got tonight. Thank you.
Excellent. So on the website, and we also sent out this link, we pulled a few snippets from the study that Aquila was talking about, that kind of longer term solution of the barriers and solutions to housing. We'd love to hear your feedback on that, or have you provide that feedback directly to the Planning Commission or Council. What do you like that is in there? What's missing? This kind of information is really the feedback that we need to make great decisions and move and get solutions here in our community. So you also might be asking, what is done with this feedback? How can I be a part of change? And really, it's a bit of that kind of be the change that you want to see. And so on the website, and we've linked it here as well in English and in Spanish, are a few steps that you might be able to do out of this meeting tonight. One of those is to kind of get involved on the longer term housing fix. That's with that Tualatin 2040 project. Another, if you came here tonight and we're looking for immediate need for housing, for rent, or other types of assistance, getting in contact with Catherine and Community Action, they'll be able to provide you kind of what they can do, and not knowing that they won't be able to solve the whole thing, but they are kind of our more immediate resource provider here in Tualatin. Betsy and a few members that we heard tonight talking, like Veronica and Africa, are on our diversity task force. You can join with them on their committee or join as an ally. You can come and speak in front of Councilor Reyes and Mayor Bubenik and our other city councilors every other Monday. And then finally, after this, you'll be getting an email from Washington County. In May, there was a regional homeless services bond that was passed. And so they're looking for input on how to spend that money in the community. So we would love for you to provide your feedback in addition to tonight to that survey coming up. So thank you for joining us for Our Home, Our Health. Karen, do you want to say any final words before we close this?
I just wanted to thank everyone and just really connect back with us here at the city and also with the panelists that you've heard from. And please stay safe and healthy out there, and stay tuned for more on housing and be part of the solution. Thank you.